Ah, high school. It's endowed us with so many inescapable adolescent memories. Think of the prom, big football games under the Friday night lights, and those iconic 1980s movies with all their moments of detention, nerd hijinks, big graduation parties. High school has such a strong place in our shared culture because as an institution, the high school has been around for so long. And also because, unlike in Europe, for most of the 20th century, high school has been a nearly universal experience, although there are plenty of asterisks that we'll explore in this module series. And high school hasn't just served as a vehicle of cultural exchange. Some economists argue that the high school has actually been a linchpin of American economic growth in the 20th century. Although, as we'll see later in this series, there are some people who doubt their calculations. The high school, as we know it, has been around for almost 100 years, but it's not been around forever. In this series of modules, we'll go back to the origins of the public high school in order to understand how it became a mass institution. In other words, we'll try to figure out how it became comprehensive. It's a question to ask ourselves now as the gears of public policy are turning and churning, trying to make the bachelor's degree into something that's more accessible, more ubiquitous, more like what the high school diploma is. Today, we often speak of first generation in the context of college. Someone is first generation if they're the first in their family to get that college degree. But not too long ago, it was actually high school where we talked about people being the first in their family to get a high school diploma. First in this series, we'll take a look at the rocky initial years of the high school in the 19th century. Now, far from being the institution that we know, love, and revile, the public high school was something that varied wildly across the United States and across this time period. In fact, the public school advocates, far from making this an easy sell, had to deal with opposition from Democrats, from Southerners, from rural people who charged that the high school was elitist. Next, we'll examine how the high school was standardized in the late 19th and early 20th century. This was a process that involved several different things. One, the changing economy. Two, the rise of private accrediting bodies that worked as regulators to standardize the high school. And three, intertwined laws. Some of them about compulsory education, but others about ending child labor. And we'll consider how those two things intertwined in the making of the standardized public high school. Now, one key to making the high school a mass institution was making sure that it had vocational training involved. But during the early 20th century, there were huge debates about how far to take vocational education. We'll see how the various progressive reformers came to a detente with the 1918 Cardinal Principles of Secondary Education report that was issued by the National Education Association. That report firmed up the basic features of the high school, the comprehensive high school. That's the focus of this series. Considering these challenges of the early 20th century speaks to today's challenges in the early 21st century as we debate the future of the comprehensive high school, whether charter schools and splitting up high schools into different college prep and technical high schools will fundamentally fragment and alter the system that we have. And finally, in our last series, we'll take a look at the question of whether mass high schools were really engines of economic growth, as some economists have claimed. We'll consider what various historians have said on this subject and think about what making high schools into a mass institution has done for the economics of America.